Well. We were just talking about that. All right, the MentisWave video here. Myth of free and fair elections. Let's see this. Majority coercion over the minority is still coercion. Yup.
Hey, internets. Most criticism of democracy should really come prefaced with the following question. Do you honestly and sincerely believe that democracy is the best human beings can do? Because this question really changes the course of the conversation entirely. Mainly in that it's kind of a cheat code to skip a lot of the BS. Because in modern Western society, everyone kind of likes to put democracy on a pedestal. We just kind of assume...
It's like I said before, right? Like I gave the illustration. I gave an illustration about like me and my brother, and this is like a true story where me and my mom, when we would vote for the new, like, you know, it was like the voting cycle, right, in California, and we'd get the voting ballot. We'd look at like who's on there. We'd look up the people. We'd be like, okay, like, do we agree with like this person, like on this thing and like on this thing? And we would decide like, oh, are we gonna vote like on this person, or maybe abstain or vote, or are we gonna vote for the other person? Like we would research all these people. We'd look it up, right? And then I had a conversation with my brother after the election, and I said, hey, who'd you vote for? I was just like talking, you know, just doing some small talk with my brother. And I said, who did you vote for? And my brother goes, oh yeah, I voted for Gavin Newsom. And I was like, and I asked my brother, so you have to understand again, the context is that me and my mom, we look up who we're going to vote for. We try to like look into like their policies and like what they believe in. And we try to make an informed decision, right? I asked my brother, why'd you vote for Gavin Newsom? And he just goes, And like that vote cancels out my vote. Right, where he didn't really give a fuck. He just voted, just like he just didn't really care, right? And that's kind of like what I mean. That's kind of probably what he's going to talk about here.
That it's the greatest thing ever, and that it represents the monumental achievement of human freedom. And when you question that, everyone seems to like to strawman any argument against democracy as lay literally 1950s mustache man, instead of dealing with...
Yeah, this is what I've been saying this like for a while now. That I think that democracy is fucking shit. Just being real, I think that pure democracy is fucking awful.
Fed criticism in anything remotely resembling a manner of good faith. And this straw man is interestingly enough so common that it happens on both sides of the boomer lib aisle, with left-leaning democracy apologists thinking that you're talking about 1950s bad mustache man white version, and right-leaning democracy apologists thinking that you're talking about 1950s bad mustache man red version, which of course is very silly because when we are criticizing democracy from a pro-liberty perspective, we're obviously not talking about either of these. Yep. So to kind of skip all that fluff and misunderstanding, it's better for people to put more emphasis on questioning the democracy narrative that democracy is the ultimate pinnacle of human civilization.
Yeah, democracy is like Actually, it's funny because the graphic being used here is actually so perfect. Is that people put like democracy up on this like holy pedestal without actually thinking about what it means.
Civilization and freedom. Or in other words, asking people whether or not they sincerely think that humanity can never evolve past democracy. That there's absolutely nothing possible beyond the horizon of human civilization that is more conducive to human liberty, the building of society, and economic growth than democracy. That we human beings are just too stupid to come up with anything that is potentially better. Because if the answer to this question is yes, democracy really is the best that humans can do, that we are in fact just a bunch of stupid apes who are incapable of coming up with anything better, then, well, long live democracy. But on the other hand, if the answer to that question is no, and that we actually can do better, well then clearly this pedestaling of democracy is very much unfounded. It would therefore mean that this tendency to view democracy as unquestionable is very much just a pig-headed dogma and fear of the unknown, rather than the rational position in defense of liberty that it pretends to be. And the thing is, if you think about it for more than just a couple minutes, you'll realize that just from a simple logical perspective, we can already prove that democracy is not without its flaws. For example, if a nation somehow manages to find itself populated with mostly knuckle draggers, and those knuckle draggers all manage to raise one of their knuckles and proclaim that 2 + 2 = 5, well, we know that that's just a bandwagon fallacy. We know that that doesn't magically make 2 + 2 magically.
Oh, you make more money than me? Well, you should give it to me. We have more votes than you. The 8 of us have decided that the 2 of you who make the most money should give it to us. It's very obvious that democracy can be against liberty.
Equal to 5. But honestly, that's an easy one. That's one of the more obvious criticisms of democracy. So in this video, I'm going to cover one of the flaws of democracy that people don't really talk about very much, which is this myth of free and fair elections.
No one said pay fair share. No one said give, pay fair share. Well, what is a fair share? Who determines that? Right? So, like, if I determine that your fair share is 99% because the 8 of us voted on it, then 99% is the fair share, right?
And why democracy ultimately results in a political and social climate that makes this quote-unquote free and fair election process functionally impossible. Also, there is no sponsor for this video, and that's because I'm currently working on something new that a lot of people interested in rationalism and critical thinking will be very interested in. And this will have both a free digital version along with a higher quality premium physical version, so stay tuned for that, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you aren't already, as the first of these will be finished likely sometime within the next 2 weeks. And if I don't make that deadline, worry not, it will be done by the next 2 weeks after that, and that will just kind of repeat in a 2 more week cycle until it's ready. Don't worry, I promise it will not be that long. But anyways, let's get things started with what exactly is meant by a free and fair election. Well, fortunately for us, we have good old-fashioned Wikipedia to provide us with the good old-fashioned establishment opinion on what a definition of a certain thing is. And they define a free and fair election as an election in which coercion is comparatively uncommon. Apparently, coined by the political scientist Robert Dahl, a free and fair election involves political freedoms and a fair process leading up to the vote, a fair count of eligible voters who cast a ballot, or in layman's terms known as voting, along with a lack of electoral fraud or voter suppression and acceptance of election results by all parties. Now, immediately we run into the problem of democracy supposedly being free of coercion, which immediately doesn't really make much sense because democracy is inherently a form of coercion. It is coercion by majority. That's kind of what democracy is. It is this idea that a non-voluntary political system is valid and good so long as the
I mean, we see this all the time, right? Oh, like, vote for me, and like, vote for me and we'll give everyone more free shit. And do it all the time. Yep.
Majority of people vote for it. That is how democracy, in its own political theory, gains what we call consent of governed, or the idea that a government's legitimacy and power are derived by the approval of the people it is governing. And the idea with democracy is that it's fair to assume that this consent exists, regardless of whether or not it actually exists, so long as the government can gain enough electoral votes. Which, for the exact same reason as the knuckle draggers I mentioned earlier raising their fists and proclaiming that 2 + 2 = 5, well, that's obviously just not a thing. What if the people who lose the election don't want to go along with the new rules that have been put into place through this system of democracy? What if they don't want to give their consent anymore? Does any democratic country today offer individuals any kind of meaningful out of this program? And the answer is no, they do not. But now, admittedly, that's probably not what they mean by coercion in this definition, but it's just important to point out that democracy itself is just majority rules, which is a form of coercion, is a form of tyranny by majority. Democracy has never pretended to be anything else. And this is where we kind of see a big reasoning mistake in the minds of the people who refuse to question.
This was exactly what the founding fathers were worried about was going to happen. Then that's why they have a couple systems that to kind of hold, to kind of dam that up and hold back the tide for a little bit.
In democracy is that they're implying that you are free in a system so long as you get to participate in that system, even if on an individual basis you don't actually have any real power. Which of course is very silly reasoning. Like, for example, if you were being made to participate in your own execution for a crime you didn't commit or some bogus crime that the communist regime made up, and they let you press the button to start your own execution in the execution machine, the fact that you're participating in it and voluntarily get to press the button if you want, does that mean that you're free from your own execution if you don't want to be a part of it? No, of course not. They'll tell you that if you don't press the button, then somebody else eventually will. And of course, people might say that that's a really unfair comparison, but actually, in terms of just reason, it's not. The same problem applies with democracy. If you decide not to vote in it, you still get screwed over by the stupid stuff that the rest of the people vote for. You don't actually have an out. And so if A and B choose to rip off C, even if C doesn't want any part in it and decides not to even partake in the democracy, well, person C is still going to get ripped off by the state in this situation. And therefore democracy doesn't actually attain anything resembling a consent of the governed here. But again, what they probably mean by coercion here is just that the election process itself is free of coercion. That people aren't being coerced into voting a certain way. They're probably not thinking about the actual system as a political philosophy itself. But the problem is, even in first world democratic countries, the election process isn't really meaningfully free of coercion either. For example, you have psychological coercion. A lot of the political campaigns of most parties, again, even in the first world, really come down to just fear of the other guy. Vote for me because other guy is literally 1950s bad mustache man. And so just from that alone, you have a lot of people just voting out of fear of what they think the other guy will do to them if they don't vote for the opposing candidate. And of course, this information isn't...
You also have the fear of like being ostracized, like socially, right? Like if you and you see this especially like nowadays, where like, oh, if you vote for Trump, well, you're not our friend anymore, right? You have like kind of social coercion as well.
Exactly honest either, because no country on earth has a system of mainstream media that is free from corruption. And of course, politicians can get away with lying. They can claim that their platform is A, with beliefs and policy positions 1, 2, and 3, and then go in a completely different direction if they want to once they're actually elected. The only form of accountability we have is whether or not they can get re-elected. And of course, since all politicians lie in this matter, it has proven throughout history to not exactly be that much of accountability at all. I mean, seriously, when was the last time a political candidate in a first world democracy actually did the vast majority of things that they said that they would get done during their political career? No, seriously, try and name one. Try to think of one honest-to-God politician that truly did everything they said they were going to do. And the sad reality is that at best we get politicians who do maybe a few things they said they were going to do, but most of the time we get politicians who just maintain the status quo, and all their promises of hope and change were a big fat nothing burger. And of course, the media can lie as well. There are many, many ways that the media can get away with lying. I've covered this topic at length on my channel. There is an insane amount of rhetoric and deception that goes into modern journalism, to the point where voters don't really have access to information to make a good vote anyways, even if politicians...
It'd be so cooked if we didn't have the internet, man. We didn't have the internet and like free X. It'd be so cooked.
Were on.
Luckily, we
and this
do.
Immediately brings up the problem of the relevance of free choice in the face of
Even if you hate Elon, that's like one good thing he did.
Gives you a choice of 5 doors to choose from, and one of those doors leads to your freedom, and the other 4 doors leads to an angry bear that will immediately eat you. Well, if you choose the wrong door, is it your fault because you chose the wrong door by your own free will? No, of course not. Obviously, it cannot be your fault because you don't have any way of magically knowing what's behind the doors. You are not a clairvoyant. You do not have this magic knowledge. So clearly it is the fault of the guy who kidnapped you. It's not magically not coercion just because you get to choose by your own free will as to which door you go through, despite the fact that you have no way of knowing what's on the other side. And so it's exactly the same situation we find ourselves in with democracy. The very process of voting has already been infected with bad information. And so people are already voting based on this fear and misinformation that they've received, often in nauseatingly high amounts. And the worst thing is, democracy kind of incentivizes this. Because democracy, again, as a political theory, claims that coercion is magically okay, so long as majority rules, well then the media and politicians are going to have a massive incentive to lie. Because corrupt politicians and shady journos, well, they're obviously never going to tell you the truth, if their ultimate plan is to rob you. And therefore, journos and politicians have a very strong incentive to work together in order to scam the populace. Especially since, unlike in free market of exchange, they don't actually have to scam everybody. They just have to scam enough people. And as long as they can succeed in that, then 100% of the rest of the population will be forced to go along with the scam. And plus, whenever there's a scam going on in the free market, at least you can sue the person who scammed scammed you. At least
Mm-hmm.
scams can be called a legitimate violation of people's property rights. But in the case of democracy, because it fraudulently claims that it has this consent of the governed, then the voters don't actually have any real recourse when their elected politician doesn't do what they said they would do, aside from just not re-electing them, which that's obviously not real justice.
Yep.
If someone were to
Mm-hmm.
say steal $1,000 from you and the only punishment they get is that they're never allowed to steal from you again, but they still get to keep the money that they stole, well, that's obviously not a really strong deterrent against theft. That's a very milquetoast punishment. Likewise, the threat of non-re-election has proven to not really be a deterrent against lying politicians, as again, proven by history. And so to say that the election process itself is free of coercion, when all these voters' heads have been jam-packed with disinformation campaigns, I mean, it's just a completely ridiculous moot point. And of course, there's nothing fair about this process at all, because
Well, the problem is like you can kind of get more information, but it takes a lot of effort on your part, right? Like it's not free. Um Again, because if there's going to be propaganda, on both sides, it's really really difficult for you to actually parse through like what's real and what's not. So you can have that information, but it's going to be at great 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 cost of action basically.
what if you're one of the voters who actually has done the research? What if you are one of the very few well-informed voters with a pro-liberty mindset, and you have done meticulous research to see through all the journo lies and the politician deceptions? And so you vote for that one third-party candidate who actually is a decent person. Might actually do something about the status quo. Well, the result, of course, is that he only gets 1% of the vote. Okay, so how the heck is that fair? There's nothing fair about that process. It is completely absurd to call that fair. All it takes is one clueless knuckle-dragger voting for status quo candidate A because they're afraid that status quo
This is what I was saying.
candidate B might be literally bad 1950s mustache man to counteract the vote of someone who actually knows what they're doing. And this immediately brings up an obvious problem here, which is that this claim of free and fair elections, well, in many ways, it's just a circular argument. They are asserting that democracy is a fair process in order to judge democracy as a fair process, with a definition of fairness that I guess just depends entirely on whether or not the election took place. I mean, sure, there's more nefarious ways a democracy can be rigged. Like, for example, Venezuelan elections are so corrupt that pretty good arguments can be made that the vote count itself was rigged. But the problem is, even when it's not directly rigged, there's still other psychological factors that play that can effectively rig an election in a more indirect manner. The only real difference is that in one case, the votes were intentionally miscounted, whereas in the other case, the voters were brainwashed. In both cases, it doesn't really matter. This is what those of us on the libertarian right actually mean when we say that all elections are stolen. This is often misunderstood as us going along with that famous quote from Joseph Stalin, "It's not the people who vote that count, it's the people who count the votes." And sure, while it's possible for democracy to be directly fraudulent objectively in this way, what we're really saying is that it doesn't matter, because misleading the voter base is also a way that you can steal an election. So whether it's rigged by this kind of deception, or rigged by, say, having fraudulent vote counting machines, well, the only real difference there is that in one case the rigging occurs in the line up to the election, whereas in the other case the rigging occurs after the vote is cast at the ballot box. So if people have no idea what they're really voting for, then there's no real meaningful difference. Because that's another really big problem with this myth of the free and fair election. It claims that a big part of it being free and fair is that there's a lack of electoral fraud. Okay, but if the voters are being regularly lied to every single election in every single supposed first world country, how is that not fraudulent? Because again, in the market, we consider both of these things to be fraud. Every reasonable person considers both sides of this to be fraud. Whether a merchant scams you by lying to you about what the product is, and then you go home and open the box, and that new PlayStation you supposedly bought turns out to be just a box of apples, or if you get scammed by being charged more money.
What the hell is going on in chat? Hold up. If the place is run by a Republican, it's the Republican's fault. But if the place is run by a Democrat, it's also the Republican's fault. True. So true.
Than what you agreed to pay. I mean, those are both scams. They're just different types of scams. They're different types of fraud. And so for really no reason whatsoever here, we're just going to say, in the midst of defining what is a free and fair election, that lying to the voter base, which the media and politicians, again, through history, regularly do, somehow does not
Guys, like, California, cities, San Francisco, Los Angeles, they've been fucked up for so long. These regions have been fucked up for so long. I've seen, guys, I lived in California. I've seen it go downhill. Like, I've seen it, like, with my own fucking eyes. I've seen shit just go to I've seen it go to shit. And the Democrats are always in power. They've been in power the whole time, and it's like that thing that we literally just saw with Gavin Newsom. Oh, we need to fix the homeless problem, like freaking 15 years ago, and then we need more money to give them more money, and then it just gets worse. It just gets worse and worse and worse. Oh man, oh, this is Donald Trump. It's like, dude, it's so tiring, man.
As fraud. And this is just an obviously ridiculous double standard. We accept that lying to someone about what they are getting, or later changing the data about a transaction, are both just different types of fraud. And yet for some reason, lying to the voter base about what they are getting is not considered a scam or considered a form of fraud. Instead, in this specific situation, we only consider it fraud if they manipulate the vote tallies after the fact. It is again a very weird double standard that we just kind of give the state a free pass on for no discernible reason. It's kind of another example of a problem I often see where people have this kind of Stockholm syndrome when it comes to the state, where statists will accept certain behaviors from the state that they would never accept from anywhere else. But let's move on to the next part of what we call a free and fair election. Voter suppression. There's supposedly a lack of voter suppression. And this is where we kind of have to delve a little bit into the myth of the rational voter. Because while it is kind of a different topic, a different form of criticizing democracy, one cannot properly criticize this concept of the free and fair election without at least pointing out just a little bit why some degree of voter suppression would actually make elections more free and more fair. Because if it wasn't immediately obvious up to this point, no, I obviously don't believe that democracy is the best that humans can.
People mostly vote on emotion, I think. I feel like almost everyone. If I were to guess, it's probably like 90% of people, if not more, vote purely on emotion.
Do. I believe that there's something else that we can do that would be a lot better. Again, kind of a subject for another video.
I'm not actually like a person who believes in pure logic and reason, but I think that most people use like zero.
But if I absolutely had to stick with some form of democracy to live under, some form of democracy for humanity to be stuck under for the foreseeable future, a system where voting is a privilege and not a right would be significantly preferable. And here's why. The first problem, of course, is that voters do not make rational decisions. And you might be wondering, well, what the heck does that mean? Is that just saying that voters are stupid? Well, yes and no. There's actually a very specific thing meant by this that presumes a little bit of knowledge of Austrian economics and libertarian theory, which is that when people go to vote, they don't necessarily think with the same level of rationality that they think when they go to buy something for themselves. A good example of this would be, say you're hungry. Okay, so you have a rational desire to fix the fact that you are hungry.
Yep.
So you decide to go buy a big juicy steak. Now, in that act of buying a big juicy steak, you probably looked at your wallet and considered whether or not you had the money to afford said big juicy steak. So in other words, you looked at your resources, thought about how you felt, thought about the fact that you need food to survive, and thought, yes, spending my resources makes sense to get this juicy steak. Now, of course, that's a relatively simple buy. A juicy steak, depending on quality, is $10 to $30. A little bit expensive as far as food goes, but not too expensive. Most people in first...
God, it's so expensive. I remember when steak was like $5, man. You get like a ribeye on sale, it's like $5. Man, that's crazy. 10 to 30.
World countries can afford a
Fucking
nice
hell.
steak every now and then. But then here's another example. Say, let's go back to the example of wanting to buy a PlayStation 5. In this case, you probably want a PlayStation 5, but you might not necessarily want to buy it, because you know that's a bit more of an investment than just a steak. And you don't really need it. It's fun, but you don't really need it. Unless it's just so much fun to you that it doesn't even matter. The point is, you're going to be a bit more rational with your money on that one as well. You are once again going to look at your resources and ask yourself, okay, is it really worth it? Is it worth spending $500?
I think I see where he's gonna go with this. Is that when it's like when you're faced with voting for something, you don't really consider that it's your money or not. Like, you kind of see it as being like most people are very generous with other people's money, right? So like something that you would rationally say something that you would rationally say no to because it's your own money and like you can feel the payment coming out of it, they might agree to that just because they don't actually see the money itself. Yeah.
$100 or
I think
whatever a
that's where he's going with
PlayStation 5
this.
currently costs on something that really just amounts to fun. And then, of course, there's the fact that the games also cost money. Chances are you're going to be a bit more careful with that decision. And you might be wondering, okay, well, what the heck does this have to do with the myth of the rational voter? Ah, see, that's where the problem comes in. You see, voting effectively is choosing what to do with a whole lot of money. Taxes affect us all, whether it's direct taxation from the money that the government takes from us, or through indirect methods such as through tax incidence, where the impact of taxes is given to the consumer rather than the person producing the goods, or some similar problem. The point is, we all pay taxes, and we actually all pay a bit more than we think we do because of, again, tax incidence. And so when you're voting, you're also deciding to some degree what to do with your money. But the problem is, voters don't really think about that. When voters vote, it's been proven that most of them vote without really thinking about what they're doing with their own money. Rather, they vote thinking that they're choosing what to do with somebody else's money.
Yep.
And the result of
That's
this
the
is
problem.
that voters make decisions that are very...
And that's why people are super generous with other people's money. Right? Like they don't consider it as like their own money. So it's like, oh yeah, we should give we should have a ton of illegal people and we should just give them all money. Right? And they don't really consider that money has to come from somewhere. Most people don't. They don't consider it that way.
Stupid and wasteful. Because if you could just vote yourself a PlayStation 5, well then that would be a very different decision entirely. If there was a city out there that included some silly choice on their local ballot that everybody gets a free PlayStation 5, I guarantee you a lot more people will be checking that box for yes than the people who would actually be more rational with their own money when deciding whether or not to buy a PlayStation 5 for themselves. Because voting brings with it this weird psychological phenomenon where it kind of removes people from any kind of sense of financial responsibility. They don't understand that the free stuff isn't actually free, and this is partially because they don't really have an incentive to understand what they're really doing when they vote. An individual vote is unlikely to make the difference in the long run, and so people don't really have an incentive to be rational.
You see this happen all the time, by the way.
They don't really have an incentive to understand what they're doing. And a lot of politicians know this, and that's why they promise lay-free stuff. They know that all they have to do is cater to these irrational voters. This is why in the United States, DNC...
Yeah, like actually when the what do you call it? Those stimulus checks happened, I was actually fucking pissed. I was fucking pissed off when it happened. I'm not retarded. I'm not retarded enough to be like, oh, well, I'm not going to take it then. Because some people were like that. Well, I don't agree with it, so I'm not going to take it. Fuck no, I'm going to take it. Because if I'm fucking paying for it, I'm at least going to get it. If everyone else is going to get it, then I'm going to fucking take it. Right? But that doesn't mean I don't agree. I don't disagree with it. I disagreed with it when I got it. I was like, this is gonna fuck all of us sooner rather than later. Like we're all gonna get fucked by it. And lo and behold, we all got fucked by it because the prices of everything else went up, right? It's like I was just bitching about earlier. You could get a steak before for $5, ribeye steak on sale, $5, right? Like 10 to 30 now. Right? If you go to the store and you'll notice that everything costs more. That's the result of giving everyone free money.
Strategy can be summarized by this here Bronco cartoon. The DNC has figured out that allowing everyone in from the southern border without vetting them for anything ultimately benefits them at the ballot box. Because when you have a voter that is uneducated and lacks skin in the game, then they have no incentive whatsoever to make rational decisions when they come to voting. Because a lot of people don't really understand that voting is really just an act of indirect violence.
Tosses our last grocery run was like 8 bags of basics was $180. Is that good for you or not? I don't know what that means. Oh, it's getting too expensive. Okay, yeah, and that's a lot of bad economic policy. You give everyone free shit, it's just gonna inflate everything, and then now like the money that you have and like anything that you had is like worth less now.
You are essentially asking the state to force others to go along with your will. And when you have an...
You know that when you give money to illegal people, Tazuto, that makes everything more expensive. When you increase minimum wage, it makes everything more expensive, right? That's how it works, right? Yeah.
Unintelligent and uneducated voter, they just don't understand that. They just vote for free stuff. And
you think if you just like tell them to like give you more money, that they're just gonna pay more at their own at a significant loss to themselves, to the business? Of course not. They're just gonna pass off that cost to you. That's how it works every single fucking time.
A lot of times it's because they just think that they're taking it from the rich, or from the evil street white male, when in reality they're taking it from everyone, including themselves. But it doesn't matter because they don't understand that. And so if you absolutely had to stick with democracy, if you had to stay the liberal course, the better way to do it would be requiring voters to have a skin in the game. Limit voting to the voters who have a better incentive.
Minimum wage should increase with the cost of living. Yeah, you know what increases the cost of living? Minimum wage. Increasing the minimum wage increases the cost of living. You know that, right? That's why people don't agree with it.
To make more rational decisions. Things like owning land, being a net taxpayer. Or another one I've seen that I don't fully agree with because I don't personally agree with everything the military has done is being a military veteran. Although for this instance, I will recognize that it is one thing that could make sense because being a military veteran does in fact inspire some skin in the game and thus inspiring some rational decisions. And
so why is the cost high now when the minimum wage is still only $7 and $10 an hour? Because there's a lot of compounding factors that increase the cost of things. Minimum wage is a part of it. It's not the whole picture. If you give everyone free money, it causes that same thing, right? And you had free money being given out during COVID because of all the lockdowns. It's almost as if you shut down the economy. Like, where did you think that was gonna go? Like, you're gonna shut down the economy for like an extended period of time? Like, what do you think is gonna happen? The only free money here being given out is letting these companies raise prices infinitely. Well, okay, so if, okay, hold on. So if a company, right, you mean like Walmart or something, or like Amazon? So like if those companies increase their prices infinitely, then people won't buy it. They won't buy it because then a small company, then a small mom and pop shop can sell it for less. We need price caps? You want government sanctioned pricing? Small mom and pop shops aren't in every city, Leaf. Yeah, because they're overregulated. Cities are overregulated. You know that like all of this bullshit, increasing the regulations, increasing the price of minimum wage, all of these things actually make the bigger companies which poor people rely on disproportionately, it actually pushes them out of the city. You know that, right? Because those bigger companies are able to sell goods at lower prices. Like if you're rich, you can just shop at Whole Foods. You don't really give a fuck, right? It's not the same for poorer people.
Doing all this would not be perfect, democracy would still be flawed, but at the very least, being a military veteran does in fact inspire some skin in the game and thus inspiring some rational decisions. And doing all this would not be perfect, democracy would still be flawed, but at the very least, the federal budget might have a chance of being balanced, if you were to limit voting to the people who have an incentive to
Guys, cities are just a disaster. If you want my advice, you need to get the fuck out of there. I'm just being real. Like you need to like just consider cities like a rat zone. Like you don't want to live there.
Understand why said budget should be balanced. Whereas on the flip side, when you're just bringing in unlimited voters who on average have very little to no economic education whatsoever, not only do they not understand why the federal budget should be balanced, I wouldn't be surprised if they don't even understand what the federal budget is for, or how it works in relation to the Federal Reserve, interest rates, and the US Mint. And of course, why would they know? They don't have an incentive to know. Voters.
You want to know another thing that kind of grinds my gears, makes me a little irritated, is when people consider minimum wage jobs to be like something that like you should be able to live off of. You're not supposed to be in a minimum wage job. That's like expecting to get like epic loot out of the tutorial of a game. It doesn't make any fucking sense.
Interest rates, and the US Mint. And of course, why would they know? They don't have an incentive to know. Voters without skin in the game have no reason to understand or care about these things. And that is why voting in the context of a democracy should be a privilege rather than a right. Rather, instead, the West has kind of been infected with this insanity of believing in universal suffrage. This idea that everybody is equal and everybody gets
You shouldn't strive to stay in a minimum wage job. You basically stay at a minimum wage job to build skills to advance to the next class. That's what you should be doing.
vote, and that any kind of restrictions on that is late 1950s bad mustache man. Red version or white version, pick your poison. And what's funny about universal suffrage is that the logic behind it can also be used to extend to people who aren't even in the country. If you're going to say that the greatest possible number of people should be voting as
minimum wage jobs should be for high schoolers, says Dockerbert. Yeah, because they're minimum wage. They're literally the lowest possible job tier. That's why they're called minimum wage. Right.
as long as they're affected by that vote in some way. Okay, then why shouldn't everybody in Africa have a vote on what goes on in European nations? African countries have been affected by numerous geopolitical policies of European countries. So why shouldn't every single one of them get to vote on what goes on in, say, United Kingdom Parliament? Or for a more direct example, how about Namibia and German relations? Namibians are still affected by German politics, so why shouldn't they be allowed to vote in German elections? If, again, we're going through this logic that every adult is equal and that every adult who's affected by the policies should have a say in it, you'll realize pretty quickly that universal suffrage believers don't actually have an argument against this level of insanity. For instance, ask them why the people of Panama shouldn't be allowed to vote in United States elections due to the relationship with them in the Panama Canal. Because those people are very obviously affected quite heavily by US border policy, US foreign policy, and US trade policy. Those of us who recognize that voting should be restricted to those who have actual skin in the game can easily answer this question. The answer being because they aren't the ones paying for it. They aren't the ones who will bear the brunt of the responsibility for irrational decisions. But universal suffragoids who deny that reason, they don't have an answer. No, seriously, if you look up all the arguments for universal suffrage, you'll find out that every single one of them can be quite easily flipped to extend to people outside the country. In fact, they honestly don't even have a good argument against why the right to vote should not be extended to 5-year-olds. They'll sit there and tell you things, oh well, that doesn't make any sense because children, they don't know what they're doing. Children don't understand the budget. Really? People who don't understand the budget shouldn't be allowed to vote? Wow. Literally 1950s
That's crazy.
Mustache Man. And then finally, for this free and fair election, we have the acceptance of election results by all parties. Now, ignoring the fact that the Democrats are still denying the election results of 2016, and a lot of Republicans are also denying the election results of 2020, it doesn't really matter because the way democracy works is that the losers are kind of forced to go along with it anyway. That is what democracy is. It is.
The problem is that Pondor on Kick says the problem is upward trajectory in most places I've worked in is nearly non-existent. Yeah, I will admit that shit's kind of fucked right now because of all of the debt that happened from COVID and the amount that was given out. Shit's been really fucked since COVID. Really, we need to get rid of a lot of entitlements, I think. That's like the big thing right now. Like honestly, like kind of big W for like taking away a lot of the illegal immigrant entitlements right now. I think that's really what you have to do. Because all of this like these taxes are going towards like I think that taxes should go primarily to American citizens. Like any sort of funding that they raise from taxes should primarily go to American citizens. That hasn't really been and also like not only that, like welfare is like fucking out of control right now. Like there's people right now complaining that about how there were some like loopholes closed so that they can't go on vacation with like food stamps anymore. There's like shit like that going on. Just people being super irresponsible with like while they're on welfare. Which is like, I guess that kind of makes sense. But like, you know, the fact that you can't even do that is ridiculous. Yeah.
The justification of coercion by majority. So whether they accept the results or not almost kind of doesn't really matter. That's actually the main problem. As stated by Murray Rothbard, majority coercion over the minority.
Beggars can't be choosers, in my opinion.
Is still coercion. And so this idea of a free and fair election, it's just not a thing, especially under the modern day insanity of universal suffrage.
Tazuto says, God forbid someone who can barely afford food can get a damn soda once in a while. I don't give a fuck, honestly. If you're getting food for free, you don't get to pick what it is, in my opinion. I'm just being real.
suffrage. It is definitely not a thing. And honestly, even without the problem of universal suffrage, you'd still have the issue of coercion by majority. And at this point, a lot of people might say, okay, well, but this MentisWave guy, he's just mostly arguing from a point of rationalism. But the thing is, there's actually a lot of empirical data and evidence that suggests what I'm saying is true. For example, there's actually been some neuroscience studies showing that voters really do vote largely.
Master Seda says, I don't see the harm. The harm is entitlement. That's the harm. The harm is an idea that you should be able to pick what you get for free from people. That's ridiculous.
Based on fear of the other guy. And so negative ad campaigns and propaganda and fear-mongering will always be a thing.
When I say that, it's by principle. It's not like an issue of like, does it matter if they have soda? Not really. It doesn't really matter. But my point is that you don't get to pick at all.
And then, of course, there's data showing just how much voters vote for just free stuff. There's a fairly simple study from 2021 which looked at this kind of thinking from the standpoint of education and income, which showed that people of low education and low income pretty consistently had some of the highest averages for believing that the government exists to, well, you know, provide them with free stuff. Or another big red pill on voter rationality is the fact that there's been many studies that have looked at bandwagon voting. In other words, there's at least 5% of the population who votes not based on policy,
and like when me and my mom had no money, we specifically didn't take welfare because we knew that it was bad. Like it was bad like for your attitude, basically. Does that make sense? That's how I learned how to cook, by the way. You know how like I'm really good at cooking now? I learned how to cook because I didn't want to eat like shit. And I learned how to butcher stuff because it was cheaper to butcher than it was to like actually buy pre-cut stuff. And I got tired of eating yakisoba every day.
But they vote entirely based on
yakisoba and cabbage and carrots.
Who they think is going to win because
and
they
hot
want to
dogs.
be like
those shitty fucking hot dogs. Those chicken hot dogs.
On the winning side. I've mentioned this before. It's pretty disturbing, but also just a little bit hilarious. It just kind of proves one of the points in the myth of the rational voter, that a lot of voters don't really have an incentive to...
Sorry, I'm doing that thing where I skipped... I talked too much and I skipped the thing. You want to know like a hack? Kind of... here's a hack. If like you're living like kind of minimum wage and like you're kind of super like giga stuck, if you work a food job, you can get free food. That's like a huge buff. Like if you work at like a restaurant or like a sandwich shop, you can just get free food from working there. Like on the day that you work, usually they'll give you free food. And it's pretty good. On
the winning side. I've mentioned this before. It's pretty disturbing, but also just a little bit hilarious. It just kind of proves one of the points in...
Sorry. I just remembered like my mom, she doesn't like corned beef that much anymore because like during St. Patrick's Day, they had like the corned beef, right? And if you went the day after, like the day after St. Patrick's Day, all the corned beef was on sale and it was like 75 cents a pound. And we would just buy, like we get like a cart and we would just stuff the cart with all of the corned beef, the old corned beef. And I'd throw it in the freezer, right? So we would just have a freezer full of like those like packs of like St. Patty's Day like corned beef, and I cooked it in every single fucking way possible. I boiled it, I roasted it, I grilled it, I smoked it, I did everything to the fucking corned beef. Everything you could imagine, I cooked the corned beef, and like now my mom like she just like. She can't eat that much corned beef. She's like, okay, I'm just fucking over this.
The myth of the rational voter, that a lot of voters don't really have an incentive to care about their vote because they believe their vote will have a very minimum impact, so they vote based on really weird, irrational, emotional reasons instead. And then when it comes to corporate media honesty, I mean, I've already done an entire video on that one, but even without that, political media bias is a pretty well documented phenomenon. And then of course, for politicians and their honesty, well, that's where things get a little bit nuanced. Studies that look at this from a purely quantitative perspective conclude that politicians keep their promises roughly 50 to 67% of the time.
Kick's frozen? All right, I'll fix it. Sorry. You know what I should do, guys? You guys think I should make a video on some basic recipes, like if you don't have much money? because there's some like fucking tricks you can do. Like honestly, this like saves so much money now. Hi. What was I talking about? Mommy, do you still hate corned beef? She doesn't want to eat too much of it. Yeah, I was gonna say there's like a lot of food stuff that you can do to like really save money. If you have trouble with money, honestly, chicken is really really OP. Probably one of the most OP things you can do is like, I know it's like kind of expensive, but you either get a Costco membership of your own, or you mooch off of a friend, and you buy like those chickens, those rotisserie chickens, and you make like soup. That's like really OP. Like you get that, and then you cut the pieces off, and then you boil the bones, and then you get like a nice soup out of it, and then you just shred up like the remaining in there, and you add some carrots, you add some rice. Yeah, it makes like a really good soup. It lasts you like a long time. Chicken in general is like pretty cheap. There's like some really good chicken steak recipes I know of that will cost you like under $1, and they'll be like really really solid. Yeah, the problem is if you eat it like even like a place like McDonald's is gonna cost you like $10. Like even if you go kind of budget, like it's still gonna be like around seven. Right, like a mini meal is like what, $5? You get a mini meal for $5. You probably want to upgrade your drinks. It's like another 60, 60, 70 cents. So you end up spending like $6 for a mini meal. And that's gonna be like one meal, right? Whereas you can buy a pack of chicken for like around that cost, and then you can make chicken steaks out of it and you can freeze the rest of it. So it's really cooking is kind of OP if you have no money. Either that, either learning to cook or learning to cook like, and when I mean learning to cook, I mean learning to cook from scratch basically. Is really really good. And the other alternative is you work at a place that has food, like you work at a sandwich shop or something like that. I've used both of these strategies, by the way. um but the the reason why you don't really want to eat packaged foods too much, because they're not really good for you, and they're also really expensive. Like the cost, like for instance, you can buy like a bag of rice, and that bag of rice will last you a long time versus buying like rice-a-ronis, which are gonna like, you like one shot of rice-a-roni and like it's gone, right? Like one box of the rice-a-roni is like gone. It's like a dollar 50 or something, dollar to $1 to $2 for rice-a-roni. Like you just eat it and it's gone, right? Whereas if you buy like a big bag of rice, you can cook it like a lot, like over time. And it's gonna cost you like more up front, but then it's gonna be significantly cheaper in the end than if you keep buying like fucking macaroni and cheese and like rice-a-roni like over and over again. Um, the other thing too is I don't know why. Yeah, and like not buying packaged stuff. Like instead of like buying salad like in a bag, you just like buy a lettuce and you cut it yourself. And the other thing is to always buy stuff on sale. So like usually I'll go to the store, and this is just like a carryover, like it's a carryover habit from like before when I had no money. I would go to the store and I would go to the meat section first and see what's on sale, like meat wise, and then I will pick what meat's on sale and good quality at the same time. I'll min max. I'll be like, okay, well, like this one is like really cheap right now. It's like off by this percentage, and it looks like it's high quality today. Because if you go in the morning, you actually have better access to like better quality, because that's when they put the meat out in the morning. So you go like kind of like 8 to 10 o'clock, and you get there, and then you buy the stuff on sale. And then so after you have the meat, then you're like, okay, what vegetables pair with this? And then you look for vegetables that are on sale that pair with the meat. And then you just use whatever starch you want, like potatoes. Like potatoes are kind of more expensive. Rice is pretty cheap. I would go with rice, honestly. Yeah. And then you use like coupons, and if you can, you fucking double the coupons. So like some like high level strats are like you're gonna want to buy when sometimes places have gift cards, and they have overvalued gift cards where they're like, oh, we'll give you $100 worth of gift cards for $80. So you buy those, and then you stack those because those stack with coupons. So now you're like getting a 20%. You're getting like that what's that? That's you're getting like that 25% bonus, 25% bonus value. And then on top of that, you have like another coupon. So you're like just stacking like you're stacking the discounts. That's like another strat. And then you do that, and then you can use that to save money for whatever training and stuff. Like you have to invest in like yourself basically, right? So investing in skills that will get you higher paying jobs, right? But the problem is if you're just playing like you're playing like constant catch up because you're just eating at McDonald's every day, you're just gonna get stuck basically. Is it the tutorial is like a lot harder now, like for sure, because of like the economy. But what choice do you have, really? I'm just being real. Like, what are you gonna do? Like, just complain about it and just be like stuck for like perma stuck? Like, you gotta just like think about what you can do, like the micro adjustments you can make, and then just make sure you're investing in like yourself, because that's how you make more money, is by leveling up yourself. If you never level yourself up, then you're not gonna like you're not gonna be able to make more money. The minimum wage jobs are literally like tutorial, like level 1 jobs. They're like level 1 quests, and you have to like get exp and level up your class level so that you can get better quests basically. Remember that $5 a day is a lot of money. It is. And like, stop drinking Starbucks. That's the other thing, by the way. Starbucks, dude, if you're like you're poor and you're fucking drinking Starbucks every day, you're just being like, you're fucking up, man. Like, I'm just telling you, like a Starbucks is like what, like $6 times like, when you drink that every day, like that's like $180 a month. That's crazy. Like, that's a lot if you have no money.
Depending on various factors. However, the problem is they usually only keep their promises when it falls in line with how their institution works anyways. In other words, the promises they're keeping are the promises that would be easy for them to keep, that would fall within their party.
You want to know like a sick coffee recipe I used to do when I didn't have money? I would make like coffee, and I would get whipped cream. I would get like cream, like just regular cream. I'd whip it myself, right? So you put it in a bowl with a whisk, and you whisk it. You add a little bit of salt to the cream, and then raspberry jam, and you whip that. You make like a raspberry foam, and you just pour it on top of your coffee. Like, brew like a nice thing of coffee, then you add that raspberry sea salt foam on top, and you just eat it, and you just drink it. It's super good. I used to do that when I had no money.
Line and how the government already operates. And so the promises they're breaking would be the promises that actually would deal a challenge to the status quo. Because, you know, of course, heaven forbid that any politician would actually do something that challenges existing power structures. And that would just be awful.
Sorry. Sorry. I'm not saying this to make you feel bad if you have no money. I'm saying this because I want you to do better. I want you to get out of it. And that, like, I'm giving you this advice because it's the only thing that you can do. Like, if you just blame society like over and over again, and you're like, oh, you know, and I mean, it is kind of their fault, just being real. Like, it is kind of their fault. They kind of did fuck shit up. But like, if you keep it out of your own control, then there's nothing that you can ever do about it. You're just going to be perma stuck, perma fucked. And I don't think that's a good state to be in, right? And like, complaining isn't gonna get you anywhere. And I'm not saying that it's fair. It's not fair. It's fucked up. These motherfucking politicians, they fucked everything for everybody. And they've been giving our money to illegals and to fucking retards like the entire time. And it sucks. But I'm not about the, well, fucking GG, like there's nothing I can do about it. I don't think that's true. And I don't want people to be in that position to like actually think that that's true. And then you're just fucked basically. So that's why I say stuff like this. It's not, I'm not trying to be like an asshole and being like, well, if I can do it, then so can you. I'm saying it because it's really the only choice that you have. Unfortunately.
politician would actually do something that challenges existing power structures. And that would just be awful. And of course, one only need to take a quick gander at voting demographics to understand why the DNC has adopted an open border strategy. Spoiler alert, it's not because the Democrats suddenly adopted the libertarian principled position on open borders based on a utopian interpretation of natural law theory. Oh no, it's because they figured out it provides them with a nice steady stream of voter cattle. That's it. It's legitimately the only reason. And so this idea that you can have a free and fair election in a world where politicians and the media are corrupt and dishonest and voters are brainwashed and irrational, well, modern democracy has proven to be nothing more than ruled by deception. In conclusion, the myth of the free and fair election is an example of allowing horrible to be the ally of bad. People will often point to horrible elections, such as examples as in with the North Korean blatantly fraudulent elections that have only one choice on the ballot and have mandatory participation so that they can claim 100% voter support and turnout as an example of an unfair and unfree election. And so a lot of democracy apologists have adopted a strategy of pointing to those obviously silly elections to distract from the fact that elections in first world democracies are also severely flawed, just less so. In fact, if we're being honest, the only difference in the fairness or freedom in North Korean elections is that the DPRK is at least honest about the fact that they are not fair or free. They are at least honest about the fact that you are voting for the status quo. I mean, it's just the one option that they have. You vote for the status quo. Well, that's pretty much how North Korean elections work. One option, status quo. There you go. Whereas in other elections, such as US elections, you got status quo.
That sounds like it could be an Asian name.
Red version and status quo blue
Who
version.
is status
and you can
quo?
argue that red version is better
What are
than
his
blue
policies?
version, and to some ways I would agree. But the point is that democracy is obviously not a perfect system. In fact, it's not even that good of a system. And we need to start accepting this fact so that we can finally one day move on as a species to a better system. Anyways, that's all I have to say for today. Please like, share, comment, and subscribe. And also, if you can, please support the channel by donating to me on Ko-Fi, subscribe
And
star,
buy the
or
hat.
by
Buy the Fumo hat. Buy MentisWave. You know what? I'm gonna show the Fumo hat on stream today. I didn't open it yet because I wanted to open it on stream. I'm gonna show you guys the Mentis hat today. Make sure you guys pick it up. I love Fumos. I'll link you guys the video. Another good video by Mentis. I like Mentis, man. Mentis has good videos.